Ashley E. McKenzie is a sociologist and qualitative researcher who earned her M.A. in sociology from the University of Arkansas in 2011, and later pursued a Ph.D. in sociology at the University of Georgia, with a dissertation on disaster, inequality, and community recovery, and she is now an assistant professor of sociology at Middle Tennessee State University, where her work focuses on disasters, environmental sociology, gender-based violence, intersectionality, and qualitative and ethnographic methods. Her publications build on these areas by examining how social inequalities shape disaster experiences and community responses, and her early scholarship on the rainbow family reflects her grounding in symbolic interactionism and immersive ethnographic fieldwork. This 2011 master thesis, Modern-Day Utopia, an examination of internal social control among rainbow family, is an in-depth sociological study of the rainbow family's annual rainbow gathering, asking how a group that claims to have no leaders, no formal rules, and a utopian, anti-authority ethos, still manages to keep order and a shared way of life. Using ethnographic fieldwork at the 2010 National Gathering plus interviews and online materials, the author shows that the community relies on strong shared values, peace, anti-consumerism, spirituality, environmentalism, a work-focused informal hierarchy, from drainbows to respected elders, and a mix of gentle and sometimes harsh shaming to regulate behavior. Practices like labeling non-workers as drainbows, isolating alcohol-heavy A-camp, informal policing through shanty Sena, and redefining deviance, tolerating psychedelics but condemning certain violence, theft, or environmental harm, all function as internal social control. The thesis concludes that rainbow is a countercultural space that both resists mainstream Babylon society and depends on everyday discipline, emotional bonds, and community labor to sustain its temporary modern-day utopia. The introduction explains that the rainbow family is a large, loosely organized group that gathers each year in the woods to camp, pray for peace, and live communally without formal leaders or written rules. The central problem the author examines is how such a group manages order and guides behavior when it claims to have no structure or authority at all. The study argues this matters because understanding how the rainbow family maintains harmony, settles conflicts, and preserves its shared identity can shed light on how alternative communities function, how group norms emerge without formal enforcement, and how people create a sense of unity outside mainstream society. The literature review lays out the ideas and prior research the author uses to make sense of the rainbow family. First, she explains that her main lens is symbolic interactionism, which basically says people learn who they are and what things mean through everyday interactions and shared symbols, not fixed rules. She then focuses on shame as a key social emotion, drawing on Cooley's looking-glass self and later scholars. She explains how people constantly imagine how others see them, feel pride when they meet expectations, and feel shame when they do not, which in turn guides their behavior and helps keep groups in line. She distinguishes between shame that ultimately brings people back into the group, reintegrative shaming, and shame that pushes them out, disintegrative shaming. Finally, she reviews empirical studies of alternative and deviant subcultures, such as jam band fans, rave and EDM scenes, anarchist spaces, punk scenes, and earlier work on rainbow, showing how such groups create strong solidarity, resist mainstream society, redefine what normal or deviant means, and often rely on informal norms and emotional pressures, rather than formal police or laws to maintain order. Setting and Methods explains how the researcher approached and carried out the study. She begins by stating that her perspective is grounded in qualitative, interpretive sociology, meaning she seeks to understand people's meanings and experiences rather than measure them numerically. She then describes how her personal background, familiarity with some rainbow attendees, and preparatory reading shaped her ability to enter the field as both an observer and participant. The study used purposive and snowball sampling to interview people who had attended recent gatherings, including longtime elders and newcomers, and the researchers spent 8 days at the 2010 National Gathering in the Allegheny National Forest in northeastern Pennsylvania, conducting participant observation, taking field notes, and recording interviews. Finally, she explains that she analyzed the material through grounded theory methods, transcribing interviews, coding field notes line by line, comparing themes across data, and triangulating observations, interviews, and online materials to strengthen the credibility of her findings. The author explains that her connection to the rainbow family came partly through personal relationships and partly through planned fieldwork. Before ever going to a national gathering, she already knew some rainbow participants, including Mama Wanda, who helped her gain entree and led her to other attendees for interviews and contacts. She prepared herself by learning rainbow-specific slang and customs in advance, so she could function more like an insider than a complete outsider once she arrived at the 2010 national gathering. She then traveled to the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania with her husband and friends, camped on site for about a week, shared in the daily work of living in the woods, and moved through kitchens, workshops, and drum circles, while observing and interviewing people. In the findings, the author shows that the rainbow gathering looks leaderless and unorganized on the surface, but in practice it has a lot of structure, work, and rules built into everyday life. Camps, kitchens, councils, and shared spaces like Main Meadow are informally organized, and repeated rituals such as the July 4th silent prayer circle, drum circles, weddings, and communal meals help create a shared sense of meaning and community. A clear social hierarchy emerges around who works and who does not. Those who build kitchens and infrastructure and arrive early gain respect, while drainbows, schwag hippies, and encampers are stigmatized. The group also redraws what counts as acceptable or deviant behavior. Alcohol use in the main gathering, environmental damage, theft, and some sexual behavior are condemned, while widespread psychedelic drug use is often normalized. Social control happens through a mix of gentle and tough methods: public shaming, being talked to by other campers, being restrained, duct tape and similar tactics, when dangerous, and, in extreme cases, being removed from the site entirely. Rather than relying on police, internal actors such as Shanti Sena, elders, and respected long-timers do much of the conflict management. All of this is tied together by a strong shared ideology: anti-capitalism, opposition to Babylon, mainstream society, spirituality, peace, and communal work, that fosters solidarity and keeps this unorganized organization functioning. The unorganized organization explains that although the Rainbow Gathering claims to have no leaders, no rules, and no formal organization, it still functions through a kind of loose behind-the-scenes structure. People arrive, set up camps, build kitchens, dig latrines, coordinate water, and create shared spaces like Main Meadow, none of which could happen without coordination, experience, and informal authority. Participants themselves describe the gathering as unorganized organization, meaning decisions are supposedly made by consensus, yet certain longtime members, early arrivals, and skilled workers end up having real influence. In practice, the gathering operates because many people quietly take on responsibilities, and others follow the rhythms and expectations that have developed over decades, creating an organized system that hides under the appearance of freedom and spontaneity. Rituals describes the many repeated activities that give the Rainbow Gathering its sense of meaning and togetherness. These rituals include the famous July 4th silent morning prayer circle, where thousands hold hands, chant Om, and then break the silence when children enter the center, the twice-daily communal meals, drum and chant circles, weddings, and workshops on everything from yoga to sustainable living. Drug use, trading circles, and nightly gatherings around fires also function as routine communal practices. Even though the gathering rejects formal religion or structure, these rituals help create a shared identity, emotional connection, and feeling of belonging. Through predictable patterns, how people eat, pray, dance, celebrate, and even get married, the community builds a sense of unity and reinforces what it means to be part of Rainbow. Social hierarchy and work explains that, despite claiming to be equal and leaderless, the Rainbow Gathering actually develops a clear social hierarchy based on work. Those who arrive early to build kitchens, latrines, water systems, and stages gain the most respect, and are often treated like informal leaders or elders. People who consistently help with cooking, hauling supplies, or maintaining camp infrastructure are seen as reliable community members. In contrast, those who do little but eat, linger, or ask for resources are labeled negatively as drainbows, schwag hippies, or part of a camp, and are widely looked down on. Even blissing, relaxing, or doing drugs at the fire pits is acceptable only if someone also contributes labor. In short, the community's survival depends on hard work, and informal status rises or falls based on how much someone helps, creating a social structure that contradicts the gathering's ideal of total egalitarianism. Deviance Redefined shows that the rainbow gathering redefines what counts as good or bad behavior in ways that often differ from mainstream society. Alcohol use in the main areas, harming the environment, stealing, or behaving aggressively are seen as serious problems, even though drinking is legal outside the gathering. Meanwhile, widespread use of psychedelics and marijuana is treated as normal and acceptable. A camp, where heavy drinking occurs, is viewed as a place for troublemakers and is kept separate from the rest of the gathering. The community also uses its own slang and labels, such as calling a rule breaker a drainbow to mark what it considers deviant. In effect, the group flips mainstream expectations. Behavior society condemns, like drug use, may be welcomed, while behavior society accepts, like alcohol consumption, may be rejected. Through this redefinition, the gathering creates its own moral world and its own standards for right and wrong. Shame, duct tape, and total removal explains how the rainbow gathering keeps order when someone behaves in a way the group considers dangerous or disruptive. Most of the time, people are corrected through gentle public shaming, being spoken to firmly but kindly, reminded of community expectations, and encouraged to do better. These encounters often make people feel guilty enough to change their behavior on their own. When someone is severely intoxicated, violent, or likely to hurt themselves or others, campers may physically restrain them using blankets or makeshift methods, what participants casually call duct tape, meaning improvised, temporary restraint. If someone repeatedly causes harm or commits a major offense such as serious theft, assault, or child endangerment, the community may escort them away from the gathering entirely, sometimes driving them miles from the site, rather than involving police. Although extreme measures are rare, this system shows that the group relies on its own forms of discipline, shaming, restraint, and removal, rather than outside authorities to keep the community safe. Redefined Agents of Social Control describes how the rainbow gathering relies on its own people, not police, to handle most conflicts and problems. Instead of formal law enforcement, the group turns to longtime participants, respected elders, and especially the Shanti Sena, a volunteer peacekeeping tradition within Rainbow. These individuals step in when someone is acting dangerously, mediate disputes, calm down fights, and help manage crises. Even in serious cases, such as when a murder suspect was present, Rainbow members negotiated directly with the police and persuaded the suspect to turn himself in through their own trusted intermediaries. Although police are physically nearby and sometimes issue citations, Rainbow attendees generally avoid involving them because many distrust mainstream authority. As a result, the community's agents of social control are redefined. Rather than official officers, the role is filled by everyday participants who maintain order through negotiation, presence, and community trust. Shared ideological embeddedness and solidarity explains that the Rainbow Gathering holds together because its members share a strong set of beliefs that shapes how they see themselves and the outside world. Many participants embrace anti-consumerism, anti-capitalism, environmentalism, spirituality, and a desire for peace, and they view mainstream society, Babylon, as corrupt or misguided. These shared ideas help people feel connected even though they come from different backgrounds. Drug use, bartering instead of using money, communal work, and expressive spirituality all function as everyday ways of living out this shared worldview. Those who deeply embrace these values feel most embedded in the community and often experience a powerful sense of unity and belonging. In short, Rainbow solidarity is built from a common ideology that binds individuals together and makes the gathering feel like an alternative society, rather than just a large campsite. Summary of findings pulls together the main conclusions of the study, showing that the Rainbow Gathering survives not because it is truly structure-free, but because it has a mix of informal norms, shared beliefs, and emotional bonds that keep people in line. Although the group claims to reject hierarchy, it relies on work-based status, internal shaming, and community-enforced rules to maintain order. Rituals, collective labor, and strong anti-mainstream values create a sense of unity, while behaviors like alcohol use, violence, or theft are controlled through gentle correction or, in rare cases, removal. At the same time, Rainbow redefines deviance to fit its own worldview, accepting things like psychedelic drug use while condemning actions that threaten the group's safety or ideals. Overall, the findings show that the gathering is a functioning countercultural community held together by shared ideology, informal social control, and the emotional power of belonging. In this closing section, the author explains what her findings mean, what they cannot prove, and how others could build on them. She argues that rainbow gatherings show how a big, temporary community can flip mainstream ideas of normal and deviant behavior and still stay orderly through shared values, reintegrative shaming, and people's own internal self-monitoring. This supports theories that see shame and community ties as powerful tools of social control, and suggests that hands-on, communal work and anti-capitalist living at Rainbow may offer participants a refreshing break from everyday society. She also notes important limits. Most interviewees came through friends in one Midwestern region and were mainly white heterosexual women and men, so their experiences cannot be generalized to all Rainbow participants or other utopian groups. For future research, she suggests comparing Rainbow with other countercultural groups, doing exit surveys, spending more time before and after the gathering, attending council meetings, and interviewing police, rangers, and locals, as well as comparing different kinds of gatherings, and following the group over time to see why some people stay devoted, and others drift away. The 2010 National Gathering unfolded deep in the Allegheny National Forest of northeastern Pennsylvania, hidden down unmarked gravel roads and accessible only with local guidance. The researcher and her companions drove 20 hours across the country, followed a vague treasure hunt of directions, and finally found a rural gas station with shelves stripped bare from rainbow traffic, the first signal that they were close. A few miles deeper into the forest, they crested a hill and encountered a camp, a rough perimeter zone of heavy drinkers, littered alcohol bottles, and people immediately approaching cars for money. Past this threshold lay the real entrance, welcome home, where the rest of the journey became a steep, hazardous 2-mile hike downhill into a vast forest valley carrying everything on their backs. Upon waking the first morning, the researcher felt she had stepped into another time and place, where tents replaced houses, a mountain stream replaced plumbing, and the rhythms of drums replaced televisions and phones. At the center of the woods lay Main Meadow, or Main Circle, a huge clearing hosting more than 20,000 people. Twice a day, giant field kitchens arrived carrying vats of food. People held out their plates, called their bliss to be served. Concentric rings of people filled the meadow, drumming, dancing, playing music, hula hooping, flying flags, and displaying an extraordinary range of dress, colorful scarves, patchwork clothes, nudity, clown outfits, punk and goth apparel, cross-dressing, and body art. The crowd was racially mixed, but appeared roughly 70% white. Smells of tobacco and marijuana drifted constantly, and conversations frequently revealed widespread LSD use, so common that many people appeared spacey, wide-eyed, or mentally unfocused. The nights and workshops added their own texture. Drum circles moved in ecstatic waves of percussion and dancing. Drug use was most visible here. Spiritual undertones were everywhere. People bowed in prayer, yoga instructors urged participants to open their hearts and consciousness, and New Age healing and chanting mingled with Native American-inspired rituals. Strangers walked camp trails offering blessings or speaking in tongues. A man of Nepalese descent hugged the entire camp without speaking English, murmuring prayers as he left. Another woman burst into an interview to announce she had a divine interaction with nature, urging everyone to send energy to endangered hawks living in the forest canopy. The 4th of July peace prayer was the emotional center of the week. Thousands gathered in Main Meadow, holding hands, chanting Om, and remaining in collective silence until children entered the circle, breaking it into celebration. The scene left participants, longtime rainbows and the researcher herself, openly weeping at the sight of thousands united in a shared moment of peace. At the edges of this utopian atmosphere was the stark boundary of a camp, feared by most attendees, stigmatized as violent and unpredictable. When the researcher asked the information booth how to reach it while carrying a half-gallon of vodka to earn trust, staff tried to block her from going, warning she could be shanked or raped, insisting that camp residents aren't even rainbow and mainly serve as a buffer to keep outside drinkers from entering the main gathering. Surrounding everything was a heavy and constant police presence. Federal officers, local police, and Forest Service personnel lined the roads leading in, creating an atmosphere of tension between Rainbow and the state. The gathering site itself spanned roughly 5 miles by 5 miles of rugged forest land, and held up to 20,000 people at its peak.